26.5%. That rate is the estimate according to our partners Ipsos. It's the second highest. The second highest compared to 2002 when you look at first rounds of French presidential elections. Crunching the numbers on this election night at France 24 is Diptyque Laurent, 26.5% abstention rate. It's a big talking point.
It is indeed, Francois. In fact, abstention rates have been steadily on the rise in the past 20 years here in France, especially in local and European elections, but also in French elections. Let's take a look at that. In 2002, as you mentioned, 20 years ago, the abstention rate was 28%. Almost 12 million French voters chose not to cast their ballot. You'll remember that was the election that saw Jean-Marie Le Pen, the far-right leader, elected to the second round and facing off Jacques Chirac. At the time, it was seen as a big shock for French politics. Perhaps because of that, in 2007, abstention rates dropped slightly to 16%, or about 7 million. But since then, it's been on the rise. In 2012, the year that François Hollande was elected president, 20% of French voters chose not to partake in the first round of the presidential elections. And in 2017, the year that Emmanuel Macron became president, 22%, almost 10.5 million French voters decided to stay away from the first round of elections. And as we're seeing in 2022, that has gone up to 26.5%. As you're saying, that's an estimate of the abstention rate, which we will note later this evening. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, look at this here. You've got abstention rates in 2002. As we said, it was a record at the time, 28%, dropping down to 16%. It's been on the rise. And certainly 2022 is looking to be perhaps not as much as in 2002, but certainly a part of an upward trend, Francois.
Let's bring in Mark Perlman on this. Mark, we heard Armin Georgian describe that man who was making up his mind as he walked into vote. Is this indifference or defiance, this high abstention rate?
It's both. I mean, we've had COVID, we have the war in Ukraine, there's voter apathy, there's voter defiance. They're not satisfied with their politicians. We hear this poll after poll after poll, and some of them have decided to stay home tonight more than usual, and it's a trend. You've seen it. There was the accident of 2002, but since then, abstention has been on the rise in all presidential elections and other elections as well.
Of course, Diptyque Laurent, this is France. There isn't just one way to abstain.
That's right. Of course, abstaining is the act of not voting, but there are many ways of actually going to the polling stations, casting a vote, but not having that vote be valid. So here in France, French voters elect their president by direct universal suffrage. In other words, they head to the polling stations, they're given the ballot papers of all the candidates who are vying to be president. The voter must pick the ballot paper of their chosen candidate, put it into an envelope, drop it into a ballot box. It's a pretty simple, quick, straightforward process. But as we said, there are ways of voting without actually voting, so notably through what the French call a vote blanc or a blank ballot vote. In this case, you might choose to put an empty envelope into the ballot box. There's also the vote nul or the invalid vote. In this case, a voter might might incorrectly select a candidate, or they might choose, deliberately or not, to deface their ballot paper in some way. They might scrunch up their paper or scribble on it. In France, the blank ballot is seen as a sort of protest vote, perhaps against a protest against the candidates, against their electoral campaigns. In fact, it's the founding premise of this association. It's called the Blank Ballots Citizens Association. It's run by this man, Stéphane Guillot, and one of their founding projects is calling on the French electoral system to recognize blank ballots in their official voting count, which is currently not the case. Let's have a look though. Blank ballots do account on general for less than about 5% of votes, as you see here. It did rise from 2007. It has been on the rise, 2.5% in 2017.
All right, so perhaps a malaise when it comes to French democracy.